So, hello, everybody. It's our great, great privilege tonight to have Dr. Caroline Leaf speaking to us. It's really a big honor. We met her, I think, 10 years ago for the first time in Switzerland. We were already at that time, we were speaking about how could we bring something like that into the athletic world. But now, actually, she started. It's called the Neurocycle app that we did as a family with our daughters and athletes in springtime, and the results are just so amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, we love it.
Yeah, actually, where you have always the same trigger points, we're always challenged. It helps you so much to really, after 63 days, to have that, that it becomes, it becomes normal for you to think differently. But I don't want to talk too much. It's such a privilege to have Dr. Caroline Leaf. She's a neuroscientist and best-selling author from America. She's live today with us from Miami. We have some of the books here in German, and and Janet, our assistant, has also a bunch of books with her. Yeah, we see them there. And so please, we are so amazed that so many people are joining already. I think 79 people joining.
Wow.
Hello, everybody. Enjoy this time. Maybe you have something to write, prepare something, but we do also a recording. So you can also watch the recording afterwards. So please give a very, very warm welcome to our dear Dr. Caroline Leaf.
I'm so honored.
Thank you so much.
So lovely to be with you, with all of you, with both of you and all of you, and the great work that you do. And it's always my privilege to talk about the mind. For so many years, there's been such a focus. For the last 40 years, actually, there's been such a focus on the brain. Everything's been about the physical. And it's very important. I mean, you know yourself as athletes how important it is to focus on the physical. But you also have a very strong inside understanding of how if your mind's not right, your body isn't going to be right. But in my field, over the last 40 years, the focus on mental health has shifted and kind of got a little bit messed up. And it's focused on, instead of focusing on the mind, it's focused so much on the physical brain. So as you've learned more and more about the brain, which is good, things have actually gone kind of backward when it comes to mental health, because everyone thinks then that the mind is the brain and that everything is in the brain and the brain causes everything. But that's not actually the case, because our mind is not our brain. So the very first thing that I want to do, start off just helping everyone understand, is that your mind and your brain and your body are three separate things that work together. And the mind-brain-body connection is pretty much forming the networks that drive how we function. And in our current climate, where we're constantly talking globally about there being a mental health crisis, and even how this is getting worse and worse, our children being the most drugged children of any generation, Gen Alpha, the 0 through 15-year-olds, and even your Gen Z. When we hear this constant talk about the mental health crisis, that it's good in one sense that people are being more open and speaking about it, but it's how they're speaking about it that is the concern. So yes, there is a mental health crisis, but that's actually only a symptom of a real crisis. So the real crisis is actually underlying that. So the mental health crisis is a symptom of a larger crisis, and that larger crisis is one of mind management, managing our mind. Now, what we need to understand when it comes to mind and mind management is that your mind is 90 to 99% of who you are. And your brain and body are around about 1 to maybe 10% of who you are. And so if you dead, your brain and body are disintegrating. They're not doing anything. But right here now, as you're listening to me, you are making, because of your mind is enabling your brain and body to make anything from 800,000 to 1 million cells every single second. So your mind is doing that. If you're dead, you don't make those cells. Your mind is enabling you to be able to see and hear this and understand this conversation. Your mind enables you to fall in love, to play to do whatever sport that it is that you do, to have your relationships, to appreciate the sunset. In other words, your mind is your aliveness, and your mind is using the brain and using the body, and the three together pretty much produce how we function. If you look at it from that angle, it's very different to the current view, or the view that's been dominant for the last around 40 years. Just slow me down if I'm talking too fast, by the way. You can just say slow down, okay? For the last 40 years, as I said, there's been an emphasis on the brain, and they saying that the mind is that thing that we just don't really understand, so we won't talk about the mind, and everything's about the brain. So all of our human experiences have moved to being explained by the brain, and symptoms of any kind of symptoms we have of our humanness are labeled as symptoms of some kind of something that's going wrong. That works well if it's for the body. So if, for example, you've got diabetes, we know that diabetes, you can do certain tests. We know there's something wrong with the pancreas. But when it comes to having feeling depressed or feeling anxious, there's a lot more to that depression and anxiety or frustration or overwhelm or burnout or overwhelming stress or whatever, and panic attacks. There's a lot more to those than just being symptoms of a brain disease. So first and foremost, currently, if people are battling with that depression, anxiety, they will get a label. Bless you, by the way. You sneeze and bless you. They'll get a label based on a diagnosis, and they get told that they've maybe got bipolar depression, or they've got clinical depression or clinical anxiety. This is what we hear all the time. But we have to ask the question, is that really the truth? And has it actually made things better? Is it helping people? And if it's helping people, then you carry on using that model. But if we look at what history and research and patients, patients and people's descriptions of how that's affected them, we only see negative. We don't see positive. In fact, we see that with that kind of a biomedical approach, where you see your human experience as a symptom of a disease, that makes people worse. So it even leads to the point where people can die up to 8 to 25 years younger than they should from preventable lifestyle diseases, because we're not managing the mind. And also not only getting the diseases of the body, but getting the mental health challenges that go along with that. So in other words, what I'm saying is that if we just look at the brain as being the only thing and ignore the mind, we're going to have sicker people. We're going to have people that are more mentally unhealthy, because we're not allowing people to actually process what they're going through. Also, if we look at the concept of diagnosis, the idea of diagnosis, that implies that we know that there's an underlying biology, that, okay, you've got diabetes, which means you've got something wrong with your pancreas. That works, as I said, for the brain and the body. Like if someone's got Parkinson's, we have a pretty good idea of where the damage is in the brain. But when it comes to someone feeling extreme sadness or feeling burnt out or overwhelmed, there isn't actually a place in the brain that you can point to that's causing it. It's not a chemical imbalance that's causing that. It is actually your experience in life, who you are, how you're processing life, what you've gone through, what's going on in your community, what's going on in your life, what's happened in your past, all of that. It's you, the human in life, experiencing adverse and good experiences. And those good, bad, and ugly experiences affect how we function, because all those experiences will go via the mind, into the brain and the body. And I'm going to explain that with images and things in a moment. And then that's what drives us. So when we have an experience like maybe childhood abuse of some sort, or some extreme stress in the environment that you work in, and it's not managed and you don't deal with it, that extreme stress is an experience that your mind processes into the brain. It changes the brain, changes the body, changes the mind, and creates a network that drives how you function. If it's an unhealthy network, it's going to look kind of like this tree that I've got over here that's all wiry and ugly. Kind of looks like this in your brain. And that then is going to, that network is then going to create a change in your body that's going to make your body more vulnerable, and it's going to then impact how you show up in life. So if that's the case and we don't manage it, that doesn't get better, it gets worse. So if we're feeling that sadness and we don't deal with the cause, if we don't deal with where it comes from and how this got here and how we can fix this, then it's just going to get worse. How we show up is going to get worse. So in summary, for this first little part, your mind is not your brain. Here's a little model of the brain. Okay, so your mind is not your brain. This brain is run by your mind. Your brain responds to your mind. So if you have that toxic experience, it goes into the brain, and if you don't manage it, it will damage the brain and it will damage the body. But if as soon as you manage that experience and you find out what it is, management means that you are identifying the root cause. You can't make it go away, but you're changing what it looks like inside of you, and then that changes how it plays out into your future. So when you do that mind work, you actually change what it looks like inside the brain, and you can change it from being unhealthy to healthy. And over time, that then improves the health of your body. So healthy mind, healthy brain, healthy body, healthy life. Messy mind, messy brain, messy body, messy life. Okay, so essentially the mind is our aliveness. It's called the hard question of science, but it's actually the most obvious and easy question of science. The mere fact that we can communicate and you can listen and you can experience this conversation is your mind in action. If you were dead and you just had a brain, you couldn't experience this. So your mind is what helps you experience life. It's that psychological ability we have to respond to experiences. From the moment we wake up till the moment we go to sleep, everything about our life. The mind is using the brain. So, for example, this conversation is a bunch of sound waves and electromagnetic light waves. That's how the one part of your mind experiences it. It takes those sound waves and electromagnetic light waves, and it creates gravitational fields and all this science stuff. At the same time, your mind also works on a parallel level, and that's the psychological level. So psychologically, your mind is doing all that science, but it's also doing an understanding. You're thinking, feeling, and choosing. You're psychologically making sense of what you're saying. So the mind does two things, and then it puts all of that into the brain, and it changes the brain. And the brain responds to the mind by on an electrical level, electrochemical, neurochemical, and genetic level. And genetically, it's like a wave. So this conversation is going into your brain via your mind like a wave, like waves of the sea. And those waves build like the sea and they crash. So every sort of sentence is like a wave going in. Your mind grabs it. You've got the psychology part, the physiology part, and goes in your brain and it crashes. Every time it crashes, it makes little proteins, and the proteins are holding my words as vibrations. And the reason I'm going into so much detail is because I want you to realize the power that you have over your mind and how hopeful it is when you understand how to manage your mind, and how to show you what I said in the beginning, which is that when we manage our mind, we're actually managing the mental health crisis. So it starts with mind management. So this information goes in and it makes these little proteins. And as I'm saying more things, the proteins grow together and little branches grow. And because I'm telling you good stuff, you're growing a healthy tree versus a toxic thought tree. So in your brain, what I'm saying is growing into these tree-like structures. And the roots would be the words that I'm saying. And then the trunk part, or the branch, so the little trunks, which is in the sand here, in the pot, is your unique way that you each understand, think, feel, and choose your unique mind, how you see it, what I'm saying. And then the branches are the result of that. So everyone's branches, everyone's who's listening to me tonight, all your roots will be the same, but your branches will be different because you're hearing the same words, but you're all different. So you're hearing it differently according to who you are, how you experience life, the things you've gone through. So everyone's building their own little tree. And these trees are made of proteins, and the proteins, a lot of them grow together. Each of my words is lots of little proteins growing together. That's why there's lots of branches. The more I say, the more branches we add as are growing. So if it was just like one little branch as I started speaking, by the end of my speaking, there'll be lots of branches. And that's what we're doing all day long. We're growing life into our brain in these branches. Now, at exactly the same time, as this is happening, so my words are here, your interpretation of my words are here. At the same time as that's happening, and you'll see my point in a moment, the brain and mind's putting all the growing's happening in the brain, the mind and brain together send a message to all the cells of your body. And as athletes, I think you'll find this very interesting, that this memory is then translated into a version of this memory, and every single cell of your body, and you have 37 to 100 trillion cells in your body, which is, I hope you got that number in German there, 37 to 100 trillion. Every single one of those cells will store a representation of this conversation in the form of little proteins. And if you imagine a whole lot of beads that are kind of sewn together like in rows, and then to make a carpet. So if you can imagine a little carpet made of proteins or beads, think of little beads, all threaded, lots and lots and lots of them. Oh, I'm sorry. Let me just turn this off. We had an Amber Alert. I apologize. You get those in Switzerland? The Amber Alert, when someone, okay, it's this thing in America where if a child is kidnapped, there's an Amber Alert, and then everyone can look out for the car and the child. So the whole country's looking for and it's basically, they find these kids, which is incredible. So sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but that's a good thing America's doing. Okay. So at the same time as these trees are growing, so your body gets the instruction to grow these little carpets, these little beaded carpets. And the more I say, the more beads are added, and they're tiny, tiny, tiny. And these carpets roll up. Now, when it's healthy information like I'm sharing, we have a healthy looking tree, we have the healthy looking carpets that are all rolled up nicely. And, that's so in the tree, in the brain, in the cells of the body, the little carpets, and in the mind, which is around and through the body. The evidence of your heart beating, if you put your hand on your heart and you feel your heart beating because of your mind. Your mind is driving your heartbeat. I mean, that's how much your mind is doing. It's driving every system of your body. So as you build the tree and the little carpets in the cells, you're also making like a little gravitational field in your mind. So if you ever watch a podcast and you see the little lines, that's kind of a visual that you can imagine for what this conversation looks like in the realm of the mind, which is all around you and through you. So you'll have these waves of this memory. So the memories are the details. So these are the memories. Those are the root memories, those are the branch memories, and together that forms the thought. So this experience of talking about mental health is building a thought into your brain of mental health. So we can call this thought tree, a mental health thought tree, and my words are the memories. Those are the root memories, and those are the branch memories. So memories are different to thoughts. Thoughts are made of memories, like a tree is made of roots and branches. Okay, so now these things that are in your brain here, connected to the little carpets, connected to the gravitational field, that is a network. It's what we would call a mind-brain-body network. And everything about life, from a certain point in the womb to the age you're at now, and will continue for the rest of your life, every single experience is built into these networks. So we've got trillions upon trillions upon trillions of these networks in our mind, brain, and body. And they're constantly growing and changing because your brain and mind and body are constantly having new experiences. So everything's changing all the time. Those networks drive you. So if you think of it like this, if you have a bunch of these and a bunch of toxic ones, and we've got trillions of these inside of our brain and body, and mind, brain, and body. Hopefully more of these than these, but these would be the experiences, whatever experiences there are, maybe that lack of self-confidence because someone repeatedly said to you, you weren't good enough. And so, and that maybe happened in childhood at school or something like that. And you were always compared maybe to other people because you were maybe shorter or taller or whatever. And that kind of stuck. And it was kind of a driving thing that has driven how you see yourself and has influenced various things. Or it could be parents getting divorced when you're young and you never really process that, and then you go into adulthood and can't really form a relationship, or don't know why you are frightened of being abandoned, or maybe a parent left when you were young and you have this fear of abandonment, or maybe there was some kind of sexual abuse or physical abuse at any stage of your life or whatever. So any experience we have that's toxic, it's going to be built in as well. So the good, the bad, and the ugly are all going in those networks. So you can imagine those networks being like a giant forest. and the majority hopefully are green, and then there'll be clusters of these, and we all have these because we're all exposed to traumatic events. COVID, for example, changed all of our lives, and it created a lot of isolation, and isolation is a huge killer physically. We know that isolation, not being able to interact with people and all that, will basically increase a risk of cardiovascular issues, create mental health, a lot of depression, anxiety, all that kind of stuff. So that would be an example of a toxic tree. So now, how do these networks show up, and how does this link to mind management, and how is this different from mental illness? So mental health crisis, yes, but that's the symptom of mind management. If we don't manage these will become mental health crises in our lives. So let's say that you have an issue that, this is an example of someone just recently that interviewed me, and they gave this example, so I can use this example. Their parents got divorced when they were 6, and there was closed doors and lots of shouting and screaming, and nothing was ever explained to this child. So this child went through school, was a good student, but as the years progressed, because the divorce was very ugly, the separation was ugly, it was just really ugly. It was years of ugliness, and they're fighting between the two parents, and this child was always put in the middle of the parents. So now that is a big ugly tree that's gone on for years. It's a big cluster potentially of trees as this child's getting older. And so as this child went into adolescence and adulthood, they really battled to form relationships and had a very poor self-identity. They just thought they were worthless. And by the time we did all the work, the long story, they were showing up in their life with tremendous identity issues and tremendous relationship problems that were affecting their peace and happiness. And that's just a short summary of it. And that then led to a lot of the way they showed up was affecting their emotions, their behaviors, their body, and the way that they looked at life. And they didn't know what to do about it. So it just got worse and worse. And that exploded in a lot of depression and anxiety and emotions and feeling broken down. They went to the doctors, and the doctors told them they had clinical depression and that they've got a brain disease, and things just got worse and worse. Long story short, once they shifted their perspective, which was the following: let's have a look at this situation. You're battling with relationships, okay? So let's take that as the thought. You're battling to form a relationship. You have a fear of abandonment. Okay, so let's see now. How are you showing up? So I'm just simulating this situation now. So if I ask that person how they're showing up, they're showing up feeling very and they don't trust people. So there's the emotion that is showing up is a lack of trust. A lack of in terms of their body, they have a lot of heart issues. Okay, then there's in terms that's bodily sensation. In terms of their behaviors, what they're saying and what they're doing, but relationships keep breaking down. In terms of their perspective in life, they just they can't trust people. They're never going to form a relationship. I've got 4 fingers held up. What I've just done is I've taken that story and I've done a very, very simple overview of how that person's first conversation using the neurocycle would have looked, okay? In terms of what's the first thing that you're going to do is you're going to describe to yourself, how am I showing up from the big picture, and then you can go into the detail. So the first thing is to gather awareness of these 4 signals. Now notice I'm saying the word signals, not symptoms. The current biomedical model of mental health talks about symptoms to eliminate, thoughts that you need to replace. That's the wrong languaging. Diagnoses, wrong languaging. What we need to rather say, let's describe, let's discuss. You can't replace a thought. You can only deconstruct and reconstruct a thought. Whatever's happened to you is never going to go away. Your parents got divorced, that's it. It's going to be with you forever. But what we need to do is work out, how are you going to manage this inside of yourself? So how are you going to change this? Because that network that's driving the way you show up in relationships, that's what needs to be changed. So you can't fix that with a medication. The medication, the antidepressant, is going to maybe make you feel a little bit less strong emotions, but it's not fixing the problem. It's not doing what insulin does for diabetes. It's not fixing anything, because there's nothing broken in you. You're not broken. You've had an adverse experience. and that's been suppressed and hasn't been processed. So it's got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. Every relationship has made this bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And that's showing up in your life as bigger and bigger and bigger signals. And the signals is always the 4. So when we deal with when we manage our minds, we always start with, how am I showing up? And you start on day 1 with a big picture, like I just described. Very basic example. Can't form relationships. That's the thought. Now, on day 1, as you start doing this, can't form relationships might be the name of the thought. By the time you get to day 4 or 5, or as you progress through this mind management process, you may change the name and say, oh, okay, no, it's not actually that. It's a mistrust in relationships, or it's something like that, or it's an identity crisis, whatever. So as you go along, your understanding of your main issue that you're trying to deal with tends to change or expand or get more detailed, okay? But you're working on this one thought, and you're working on this one thought over a period of 63 days. And it may be multiple cycles of 63 days, but I'll explain that in a moment. Now, the reason I've said 63 days, which is in the region of 9 weeks, is because to change these networks that I spoke about, these plus the carpets in your cells, plus the waves in your mind, doesn't change in 1 day, or 4, or 21, or 42. What we see from the science, and I do a lot of research. I've just published another 2 papers this year. We've got 4 more papers going to be published this year. I've got a big clinical trial running at the moment, and to understand these stages of how our mind, our network changes with mind management over time. But what I have shown with my research is that for you to rewire a network, to turn this into this, it's going to take cycles of 63 days. Now, you as athletes know that it takes time to become a good athlete. We all get that. When it comes to the mind, we want a quick fix. The mind is 90 to 99% of who you are. Yet we spend so little time on the thing that's actually the biggest driving force. Majority of people globally are spending the majority of their time on the physical, exercising or not exercising, or worrying about not exercising, eating or not eating properly, or whatever, or doing things, biohacking, very popular, putting this machine on and this thing on your watch and this to track everything, taking vitamins and supplements. I'm not anti any of those if they've got good science, but they are not the solution, nor is the medication. Those are the tools in your toolbox that will facilitate the process. And if you use too many, it's going to make it worse. But you've got to be very selective about how you use those tools. What we have to do is, those are like putting just a plaster on the wound. You just sort of, you're not dealing with the core issue. So we're not spending sufficient time on the most fundamental aspect of our humanity, which is our mind. And that is why we've got a mental health crisis. So the whole point of the work that I've been doing, and the whole point of the Neurocycle, is to help you to understand yourself, to understand the mind, and to know how to manage your mind. Whether it is a day-to-day struggle, like something simple, like someone just says something that irritates you, which, let's be honest, that happens, and it kind of throws you off. And you maybe have an argument with a spouse, or your kids drive you crazy. I mean, these are the realities of life. And you've got to now jump on a Zoom, or you've got to go and train or something like that. You can use the Neurocycle, and I'm going to go through it in more detail in a moment, in the instant. You can use it in 30 seconds, and it will help you to get all that network back under control. If you've got a habit that you've developed, so for example, scrolling on too much social media, and whatever you think about the most grows, or you're in a habit of getting maybe irritated, or in a habit of just we have these habits that we grow into our lives, and we just kind of don't control them. The Neurocycle then would take you, if you've got a habit that you're doing constantly, it'll take you you're doing the Neurocycle daily for at least 63 days. If you have a trauma, like, for example, racism, war trauma, sexual abuse, physical abuse, political issues, that kind of the big stuff, that's not what we did. That's stuff that happened to us. So the day-to-day struggles, kind of, that's just life. The habits, we did them. Trauma, it happened to us. The day-to-day struggles, you can do the Neurocycle in 30 seconds, 1 minute. The habits that we created takes you normally 1 Neurocycle to fix, sometimes maybe 2. Traumas can take multiple cycles. So I've had some patients, for example, that have had sexual trauma, and they have taken, sometimes 6 or 12 Neurocycles. So that's maybe a year to 2 years because it's so vast. I mean, I've had some clients that have suppressed trauma for so many years. And in this book over here, I actually have this case study of the particular person that I'm talking about. And this book, I think it is in German. It is in German. This book's in 24 languages, I think. That is it. And there's a whole case study of who I'm going to tell you the brief story now of someone who was sexually abused, but really bad, and for years and years. And the way they cope was suppression. And they just couldn't face it. And they went through childhood roughly, you know, they behavioral issues, and they got labeled. And by the time they hit their 30s, they were suicidal. And they came on one of our clinical trials. And basically, in a nutshell, we saw from looking at the psychological, the brain and the body, that their whole physiology, health-wise, they had a body of someone who was like a sickly 65-year-old, and they were in their 30s. They all the biomarkers of their body. So the body was very inflamed, very vulnerable. They were getting sick all the time. They were suicidal. They thought that they just were useless. Very sad, very bad behaviors and things that were you know, sort of just terrible, unhappy. Brain also was not looking healthy because the mind for years had been hammering the brain, because the mind is using the brain. So if this thing's growing and growing and growing, your brain is going to take a lot of strain, and it will mess with your structure, your chemicals, your systems, you know, everything all gets confused. Your immune system, for example, when we don't deal with stuff, your immune system doesn't distinguish between a psychological harm and a physical thing like COVID virus. So whether if you get a bacteria or a virus, or you have a physical abuse like or anything, even just a small one, your immune system sees those, they both look like this. So your immune system will try and fight those. But if you never deal with it, then the immune system gets confused, and instead of helping to fix, it creates a worse problem, and you get inflammation. So whenever we don't fix these things, then we have pockets of inflammation throughout our brain, which then creates inflammation in our body. And that's where our vulnerability over time increases by 35 to 78% to these lifestyle diseases. So, but by managing your mind, you take yourself out of that vulnerability cycle. Okay. So essentially, when the Neurocycle is not a new technique. It is basically, how does information get in the brain? And then how does information get stuck in the mind-brain-body network that it drives us? And how can I then recognize the effect of being driven by that toxic, this toxic thought, and the carpets in our body? And how can I reverse engineer and deconstruct, break this down, and then rebuild it, from the roots up into something healthy, so that this becomes the big one, and this just becomes a tiny little sub branch of, oh, that used to be what happened, that was my story, but this is how I now function, versus this is how I function. So the Neurocycle is basically how we do that. And as I said, you can use it for day-to-day struggles, habits, and the big stuff. So it's teaching you, the more you do the Neurocycle, and I know the two of you can attribute, and I still do it every single day, the more you become aware of how you're functioning. So mind management incorporates self-regulation, and self-regulation is essentially what we essentially builds resilience. So we are our factory settings, just for want of a better word, the way that we are structured is with resilience and the ability to self-protect and to survive. So things like, so the Neurocycle activates that. It activates your natural resilience, and it helps you to develop your self-regulation. So you move into a lifestyle of being able to stand back and observe yourself. So let's say you're going through the day, and one of the things that people really battle with in our current day and age is the speed of information and technology. And technology, social media, they're not bad, nor is the speed of information bad. What the problem is not the technology. The problem is the mind management of the technology. So we're blaming technology, but it's not the technology. It's not the AI. It's what we're doing with it. It's how we're understanding it, how we're using it, how we're controlling our time on it and teaching our children and so on. So that's mind management. That's self-regulating and controlling your, your technology habits. So in being so bombarded, if we don't manage our mind, then we're going to be kind of missing these things. We're going to miss the signals. We're just going to go from one thing to the next. And we're going to do what we're good at well. We're going to very often pour that energy that these generate, like lots of energy that's toxic, that makes you feel very edgy. The bigger they are, the more edgy, anxious, panic attacks, and so on they generate. And that's not bad. What's happening is that these things are actually sending this electricity or whatever energy into your conscious mind as the depression, the anxiety, the sore stomach, the I hate life, the behavior changes. Those are actually pieces of information that if you focus on them, then they're going to help you. Versus if you try and suppress them, you'll get worse. So our current model is saying, oh, those are bad, suppress them, change your thinking. You can't tell someone to change their thinking. You actually have to, you can't just say, this is bad, let's ignore this and let's just build another one. This one's always competing. We have to break this one down and we have to regrow it. We have to heal it from the roots up. And that takes this time, these neurocycles, this planned and guided process of the neurocycle daily. You can put any technique into that any of those. Once you understand what each of the steps are, there's wonderful ideas and techniques and things out there. And I give lots of ideas on my app and my book and of ways you can do that. But before I quickly run through the 5 steps again, I want to just talk about another aspect that's really important. And I know this is something as athletes that you do already pretty well. And that is to get your neurophysiology calm. So let's say that you're really anxious before some kind of an event. And I'm sure you do the breathing exercises and all that kind of thing to get your mind in that space. So what we're doing is basically when you do that, you are preparing the mind-brain-body connection. You're calming down the neurochemistry, the neurophysiology, the electromagnetic flow, the quantum energy, the genetics, everything's slowing down your heart rate so that you can, and you're slowing down your breathing so that you're at the right level that you can then put all your mind energy into the task that you're going to do. Because even though it's a physical thing that you're doing, there's huge mind involved in that. It's like 100%, 99% mind and 1% of the physical kind of thing that's eventually driving you once you've got your physical to the level that you wanted. So that calming you down is called brain preparation. I call it that, okay? And if you're very worked up, the brain preparation can incorporate things like decompression exercises. So let's say that you just something really throws you and you're having a panic attack and you really need to calm down. Then you would do decompression, which takes a little bit longer than brain preparation, but it falls in the same category. So decompression exercises are just longer brain preparation. So brain preparations, if I give you an equivalent to analogy, think of when you're flying in a plane. And my husband is actually learning to fly at the moment. He's getting his pilot's license. He's a few months off getting his private pilot's license, and so that's why I'm using this analogy, because it's really an excellent analogy to understand brain preparation and the neurocycle and mind management and self-regulation and mental health and all this stuff. So if you think of it at an airport, there's a lot of, before the plane takes off, there's a tremendous amount of preparation of the timing, the planning, the logs, the engineer, the pilot, the co-pilot. They don't just take off. They don't just pull out a plane and take off. There's preparation. And so that's when I talk about brain preparation, that's breathing, meditation, you may use prayer, whatever. There's all kinds of things that you can do. I give lots of examples. There's tons of great techniques out there, mindfulness, that sort of thing, where you become very aware, general awareness, that sort of thing. But now think of it like this. If you just do that and they don't do anything else, the plane will never go anywhere. So in other words, there's no progress. If you prepare the plane, but the plane never takes off, what's the point? So the problem in the current teachings as well is that there's a lot of emphasis on the breathing and the meditation and all that stuff, and we need that. But if you just do that and you don't actually work through the issue, you don't take off. And so it's going to keep you stable for a time being, but it's not going to carry over into the whether you're managing your mind on a daily basis or whether you want to carry it over into athletic performance, because you can apply it on both levels. So that's the brain preparation comes first, and that can be 2 to 3 minutes to 15 minutes, however long you need. Then you do the neurocycle. And the neurocycle is these 5 steps, and you can put all kinds of techniques into them. So the first step is to gather awareness. And you're gathering. Gather means you're in control, not just general awareness. That comes from brain preparation and mindfulness. This is gathering. This is very specific and very focused. So you're gathering awareness of the 4 signals, your emotions, which is a signal. It's not a sickness. There's no bad emotion. Depression, anxiety, they're good for you. They're information. If you embrace them, you'll see depression. Oh, I'm depressed. Why? Not, oh, I'm depressed, I'm sick. You don't want to say that. Depression is not a sign of sickness. Depression is information telling you something that's going on in your life that you need to pay attention to. So gather awareness of the emotional warning signal. Where this emotional warning signal plays out in your physical warning signal, your body, where the emotional and physical warning signals are playing out in your behaviors, what you're saying and what you're doing, how you say and how you do it, and then how that plays out in how all 4 together are influencing the 4th one, your perspective. So 4 sentences, you gather awareness. Now you're going to go into the next step, which is to reflect. And to reflect is to expand on these 4. So you look at each 4. What are the emotions? How else does it feel in my body? How is it linking to the behaviors? What are the patterns with my perspective? What's the pattern that I'm seeing? The who, the what, the when, the where, the why, how often? So that's the reflect. Then you're going to take that and you need to write that down. Because when you write that down, especially when you're changing a habit or a trauma, in the moment, you may not have time to write it down, then you can just visualize it because maybe you're in a meeting or something. So it's the quick one you don't have to write. You can just visualize. But when you're doing a habit or a trauma, you want to write down. Now, not journaling. Journaling is step 5. This is where you get a big blank piece of paper, and in the middle, you draw a circle and you write the name of the thought. The example I gave you was that person's parents who got divorced and they never explained things, so she thought it was her fault. Or the other example of that person who was abused, whatever. The thought, whatever the thought is, whatever your thought, whatever you whatever's disruptive to you, you start there. What is the most disruptive thing in your life at the moment? You ask yourself that question. That's the thought. You work on that for 63 days. And that thought is made of memories, and one thought could have thousands of memories. So that thought, as you work on that one thought, lots and lots and lots of information, which are the memories, are going to come up. So in that step 3, which is the right step, you draw a circle in the middle of the page, you write the name of the thought, you draw 4 lines coming out of that. On each line, you write the first line, emotions, second line, behaviors, third, bodily sensations, 4th, perspective, whichever order, and then you just pour on the paper everything that you gathered awareness of and reflected on, plus whatever else comes up. You can draw all over the place. The more messy, the better. Whatever pops up, you capture it. On day 1, it'll be very little. On day 2, you'll add to it. And so as you go through the 63 days, you'll keep adding to that. The first 21 days, you get the most information. The first 21 days. After that, it's more a stabilization phase where you're practicing. So it takes about 3 weeks to pull all this up and find the root and redesign it and that kind of thing. And then it takes about 42 days to stabilize. You're still going to be learning things. You'll see when I walk you through the app, there's lots of little things that you're going to still learn, but you're basically moving in the direction of, okay, this is how I want to be moving in the future, how I want to see relationships, to take that example I gave you earlier. So that's the writing down. Once you've written it down, it's a big mess, which is great. The more, the better, the more things. Some days it's going to make total sense. Some days make no sense. Either way, you go to step 4, which is a recheck. And that's where you're going to look at what you've written to make sense of it. And then you're going to go from there. It's basically the recheck is where you can use all kinds of techniques. This is where you can use, visualization, where you can use therapeutic techniques like cognitive behavior therapy. You can use, if you know anything about psychodynamic theory, it's basically the recheck step is reconceptualizing. This has happened. What can I do about it? That's, this is where you bring in perspective. This is where you're giving yourself advice. And this is where maybe if you need extra support, you talk to a loved one or a friend or a therapist to get, this is the situation. I'm not quite sure how to look at this. That's what you're doing with that 4th step. And then the 5th step is an action. Okay, I learned this today from these 4 steps. What can I do today that will get me through today? And then tomorrow I'll go further. You're not solving it today, but where did I get to today? So it could be something as simple as a little prayer, a positive affirmation, a little cognitive behavior technique like visualizing that person who's maybe really upsetting you at work. Every time you look at them, imagining they're this size, it could be something as silly as that, but it gets you through the day. And then tomorrow you work on the next thing. So you're building the new way of thinking is being that you've solved through the first 4 steps. In the active reach, you're practicing moving towards reconceptualizing. So you're making this smaller and you're building this as a replacement. So you're practicing that, and it's step by step by step. So that's pretty much the overview of the process. So the neurocycle is a mind management is the technique or the system of mind management and all of this is self-regulation. And when you apply it in these 3 different levels, whether it's a day-to-day struggle, or whether it's a habit that you're changing, whether it's a trauma, then there's the time frame involved, and that's how we change. If we only do it once or twice, you're not going to benefit. Changing the mind is much hard work, if not harder than getting your body ready for any kind of athletic performance, any kind of athletic expertise, any kind of musical expertise, whatever. That takes time. Your mind takes even more time to get, and it's a life skill. This is not something that just happens one off. It's a life skill. So all of this is in the app. We've got the 63-day program. This is the decompression guides. This is the mini neurocycles, and we've added a parent one on now. We've got a parent neurocycle section because I just wrote a new book. I don't know if you're aware of it. I released it about a month ago. They've got a new book, How to Help Your Child Clean Up Their Mental Mess. Is it a mirror image, or can you see it correctly? Is it coming out correctly? Okay, so and this is basically how to teach your children of ages 2 through 10 how to use the neurocycle. And there's a whole cartoon. There's a cartoon character that we've created called Brainy. We've even got a toy. And Brainy is the little mental health toy that works your mental health journey with you. So if you've got children, the sooner you start this, my youngest patients were 2 and 3 years of age. The earlier you, and I know you're doing this with your girls, the younger you start this with children, the better. So this book and this toy, and we've even got a coloring book, is all geared towards 2 through 10. And the book it's basically how to do the neurocycle. It's very, very simple. And it's also lots of tips and techniques for how to adapt it for 2-year-olds, 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds, all the way up to 10. And also how to recognize things in your children like trauma and that kind of stuff. Now, what we're finding is that parents are loving this, and adults, and it's helping them understand the neurocycle because it's so simple. So a lot of adults are using this book for their inner child work, going back to the inner child. And so there's also a little coloring book as well that comes with coloring with Brainy and friends with different scenarios. And so what we need to think about with our children is children are being exposed to life. We want to give them the mental skills to be able to process life. This generation, as I mentioned in the beginning, is the most pathologized generation. Instead of being told it's okay to be a mess, it's okay to be sad, and your friend abandons you, or you have to move to a new city, or your parents are upset with each other, it's okay to be sad. That's normal. How are we going to deal with it? As opposed to, oh, your child's persistently sad. Okay, they've got a disease. They don't have a disease. We're pathologizing childhood, and that's not empowering. That's creating a huge problem because the medications that they're getting put on very early changes the brain in the wrong way. It's not good for the brain, as we know, and the body. So my whole objective here is to get parents and children together, working and collaborating on their mind. And the best way for a parent to help a child is for you to use it yourself. So when you're using it for yourself and you demonstrate that, your children will automatically learn, and then you can teach them that as a lifestyle. So that's a lot of things there. And I know you got a couple of questions. We were going to talk maybe about how we'll go forward in the future. I don't know if you want to ask me some questions or chat about that. I hand back over to you.
Oh, thank you so much, Caroline. It was amazing. Really.
Thank you.
I love it. It might have been a little fast for some of you, but I hope that with the subtitles it worked. But Caroline, what I love so much about the neurocycle, and I'm today at I think day 7 is then the second time. So we did it already for 63 days, and I love it because you give so much hope when you do it. Even when you don't feel like it, your voice and how you communicate on this app and how you walk us through in the app, it's so encouraging, and you want to do it then next morning, even if you don't feel like it. I did it actually with one of our daughters. We did it together and shared a little bit the process. I think this was also very good when we did it together. You have a little accountability. It's like with sports, you do it then ongoing. you know, sometimes maybe you have a day you don't do it, but you come back into the rhythm. And I felt really so much more resilience, so much more power, especially also with trigger points. And so, you know, where normally was always the same problem. And yeah, and then you get really, it's so empowering and so strong. And I think it's for the athletes really also amazing. It's for everyone. And this is also so nice with the app, that whatever your toxic route is, you find yourself there. And yeah, and you get really the truth. You switch lies in your life and build up. And it's, yeah, we love it. And
yeah, absolutely. I was so touched how you shared all these steps and what was going on at home, maybe in a child, when you're a little child, and with the marriage of the parents, and yeah, how you take this then later in life, how you're still hurt, but all started then. And I could see so many patterns in my life, and such a good thing, because there is hope. It's not just, oh, it's a sickness or you are wrong, but there is really so much hope to work on that. And it's super, super encouraging. And I'm so blessed. And even with the children book, I said, here, we have to order that too. So to really understand it very deep, slowly step by step, and teach our children, even they are old enough. The youngest is 13, so we start there, and get it very deeply, and just overwhelmed and so thankful. Thank you so much for this profound work, and for all the power you have for so many years, and keep going. And
I appreciate that, and I appreciate that example. You know, just thinking of some of the athletes that have come out in recent years with talking about their mental health, as you know, globally. And it's so often it relates to something that they didn't ever deal with in childhood. And it was so often a a lot of self sort of hatred and that kind of thing, and how they hid behind their talent, and, just to be able to resolve that. But they're getting labeled and medicated. That's not going to fix the problem. It's them telling their stories much more effective. But once you've told your story, if you think of, I started with that flying example, and I didn't actually finish it. You with a Neurocycle, not only are you preparing, which is getting the plane prepared, but the gather awareness is taking off. The reflect and write and recheck is flying, and the active reach is landing. So we've got to keep on flying all the time and doing those constant cycles to be able to move forward. So you think of each day as a flight, and if you don't know how to take off, you're going to crash. Or if you just take off and you don't know how to fly, you're going to crash. If you don't know how to, so it's each step we've got to go beyond mindfulness and into managing those things and looking into the depth of who we are. And the other side of the thing is you can use the Neurocycle to also build information in your brain. So if you think of a great time that you've had or something, don't let that just pass through your mind. Stop and go through the Neurocycle and focus on that good thing, and like spend 30 seconds instead of just letting it pass through, and then that activates resilience in your brain. So you can use a Neurocycle for so much stuff. It's basically how to use your mind, which is going all day long anyway. So
yeah, it's really like a muscle that you can train, and that you can shape and form, and that is it's so powerful. And then what I liked about it also, in the beginning of the lesson, the first 3 days is a little longer, right? Yes, so then the video and so on, and then it's getting really, really short. But some of the athletes are very like perfectionists,
You mean me?
And I remember someone was writing every word that you said, every word. But
it was me. It was so interesting. I wanted to catch everything, but it took me an hour.
But I think it's also important that you don't have to fear that you miss something, but that you just keep on going, and not just trying to
everything.
Catch everything. But on the journey, you get it. And even if you do a second circle or a third circle. So I think that's maybe good to know that, you don't have to understand everything to.
No, it takes you time. It'll probably take you a whole cycle before or even a couple of cycles before you get it. And there's always new information, and we're building in by next year, we'll have in January, we're starting a webinar inside the app. So you'll be able to get a monthly contact. We'll take specific examples that come up. And so that's something that you could join. If you're in the app, you'll have access to it. And so the monthly webinar will come up every month, and it's inside the app, and that's with answer questions, and it's very interactive. And then we're also building in the writing phase. You're going to be able to, by March next year, you'll be able to write inside the app. At the moment, you can only write, as you know, you can only type in step 5. So you're doing it in a journal, but you'll be able to put everything inside the app from next year as well. So we're adding lots and lots of examples to help with, like in the recheck, the step 4, where people, sometimes you think, how should I look at this? And you've got a scenario. So you can click into the app, and there's a lot of scenarios that come up to help guide you. So we're always adding, there's so much in already, but we're adding more and more stuff in to make it easier for people.
Great. I see some hands raised. Caroline, would you have some more time for a couple of questions?
I've got about 3 minutes, because I've got another meeting at 3, and I've got 3 minutes.
Then so let's go with Janina, former ski jumper. Here we go.
Thank you very much. I just have really a short question, and my question is just if the app is also available in German or other languages, or is everything just in English? I think that would be interesting for for native speakers who speak German.
I know at the moment it's only in English, and the first translation that we're getting done is in Spanish, because we've got it's one of the highest demand languages. So we eventually will have it translated into all the main languages, but currently it's only in English. Then the next one, as I said, will be Spanish. I'm not sure what the third one is yet. So there is that problem, unfortunately.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
You can slow it down as well. So you can slow down to hear everything. You can slow down the speed when you listen. So I don't know if that will help.
Oh, that's great.
Great question also, Janina. Thank you. Actually, I wanted to ask that as well. So thank you, Dr. Caroline Leaf, for taking the time. And as you said, there would be a possibility to meet monthly, and we probably can let all of them know who are joining today how that would look like. And from all of our hearts, thank you so much. It was our honor, big joy, and I think you released a lot of so practical tools that people can really start with it and make their own experiences.
Thank you. That's wonderful. Thank you for having me, and it's been so lovely seeing you all again, and I look forward to connecting soon. And sorry I have to go, but it's been so wonderful seeing you, and I'm excited to see how you all take this Neurocycle and change mental health in the world of sport. It's going to be wonderful.
Definitely.
And I hope I can help with the process.
It's the first step.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye, everyone.
So great. Really, and that so many joined from you.
Yes.
Maybe you have some question, maybe the one or other question, not a neuroscientist answer probably, but maybe we take another 5 minutes or 10 minutes if you have questions, maybe regarding the Neurocycle. Martin, please go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question. As you already did the Neurocycle for one run, I'm now at day 6, and I wanted to ask actually Dr. Caroline Leaf that question, but was not enough time. So the past 6 days, I was doing this metacog she's talking about, making this picture, and actually I was just concentrating, and I think that's what she wants on all these negative aspects of my emotions, behaviors, bodies, which somehow caused some negative feelings in me, and I am wondering if at the later moment it turns out how we are changing these negative thoughts, these negative memories, emotions, behavior, body, perspective, whatever, how we are getting to a solution.
So in the process, it's really, for us, it was really great because you just become calm, and recognize, be aware of the toxic root. And basically, you look for what's the answer. If you have always over and over the same trigger points, same problems, what makes you, getting angry or whatever. In this process, and she does it so wonderfully, you find out, hey, this is not the truth, but the truth is that. And the more you bring this new thought in your life, you will be amazed when the situation comes again, that you react differently, or that you get another strength in how you deal with those things. So absolutely, in the process, there are also times where you maybe feel like disappointed or bad, and she's speaking about that also, that the feelings that you have, it's part of the process, and it's also part of what's going on, to that structures in the brain are getting renewed or differently. Yeah. And sometimes she says even, today maybe watch a movie or do something good for you, because it is really hard, and every athlete knows that. You have to work on it, and you have also to go through hard trainings to come to have the outcome. Or you as an opera singer, that as well. But on the mental side, people are not used to invest time to have an outcome then. And yeah.
And it's so good, you really go deeper when you feel sadness or depression or anything. There is a root why you feel this way. So you go then deeper. As you continue with the cycle, you find out more and more. And so it's like light comes in, and you can change this pattern of thinking. So how did she say, to deconstruct this thought and
reconstruct
it. And so it's really interesting. I thought when I was listening to her, there's so much hope.
Thank you, Martin. We said for an hour, and we want to respect also your time. But if you're interested in maybe another meetings with her, we have to see how that would look like. Then maybe you drop us a line, or we keep you updated, or Janet, our assistant. Yeah. That would be great. So have a great evening. Thanks for joining, or wherever you are. If you're not in Europe, I see some also in America. Have a great evening. Great that you joined. You just have a look in the camera.
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining. And go deep, go after this. There's really such a secret for all our lives. Yeah. So great seeing you, and have an amazing, wonderful night. And see you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye.